Hello and welcome to the Sunshine Cathedral. The Sunshine Cathedral is a different kind of church where the past is past and the future has infinite possibilities. And with that, we invite you to come and worship with us here on Sunday mornings at 9 and 10:30 a.m. at 1480 Southwest 9th Avenue. Now, I invite you to come in and worship with us here at the Sunshine Cathedral.
It was early one morning in the year 1885, during an hour of earnest meditation and prayerful seeking, that I asked the following questions in faith. Is there any way out of these conditions? Is there any power in the universe that can heal me? The immediate and all-convincing response was not an audible voice, but it was an intuitive response by the life-giving Spirit, which penetrated the body through and through, and which illumined and vivified its every atom with newness of life. The answer to my earnest inquiry as to whether there was any power that could heal me was an all-absorbing realization of a presence not heretofore realized. This presence was more than personal. It was omnipresence. And it was so real and so vivifying and illumining that I became it. I realized it to be my life, my being, my health, knowledge, and power. It was as a consuming fire, in that all things became it and were in this presence manifested. Simultaneous with finding myself in God, I experienced the indrawing of all things. That is, that all are embraced within, one infinite source and cause. And as I looked out over the infinite's creation, I beheld what to me was a new heaven and a new earth. In these human words, God's voice is heard.
Our second reading is a reading from 1 Thessalonians. Paul, Silvanus, and Timothy, to the church of the Thessalonians, grace to you and peace. We always give thanks to God for all of you and mention you in our prayers, constantly remembering before our God your work of faith and labor of love and steadfastness of hope in Christ. For we know, brothers and sisters, beloved by God, that God has chosen you because our message of the gospel came to you not in word only, but also in power and in the Holy Spirit and with full conviction. Just as you know what kind of persons we prove to be among you for your sake. In these human words, God's voice is heard.
Well, that first reading that we heard today, that rather long reading that Tali did so well, was from Melinda Kramer. And so that her story is very powerful once you actually hear the story behind the words that you heard read today. Melinda Kramer suffered from poor health for the first 2/3 of her life. Now, she was born in the 1800s, and there just were a lot of maladies that they didn't know what caused them, they didn't know what cured them. And so a lot of times people who were what they would call sickly or frail would just be sickly and frail, and their lives sometimes cut short, or certainly the quality of their lives be hampered. And Melinda Kramer was one of these people. In fact, they used to call people like her, in fact, her doctor's diagnosis of her was that she was an invalid. She moved from the Midwest to San Francisco, hoping that the climate change would improve her health. Now, San Francisco gets cold and damp. I don't know what made her think that would be, that would perk her right up. And sure enough, it didn't. It did not do much for her health. Her experience began to change, though, after a profound moment of reflection and prayer. Sometimes when we just feel stuck, when you're stuck in a chair, stuck in a bed, stuck in a room, that's actually really good prayer time. When you're stuck behind the wheel of a car for a long drive, when you're stuck on a train, when you're stuck in a plane, whenever you're feeling stuck, sometimes that is a really good time to go within. There are no distractions. And when we are able, without distractions, to go within, that's when we find the power, the presence that was there all the time, but we needed the quietness to be able to access it. So one day, while she's sitting around not feeling very well at all and all alone, she just enters into this time of study and reflection and prayer. Her family had been Quaker, so she was familiar with the idea of the divine light or Christ's presence being within her. And she was familiar with the idea of accessing that power by spending time in the silence. So in her chair in her room, looking out the window, she just went into the silence. She went into that secret place of the Most High. And that day, in 1885, during a time of prayer and meditation, she finally asked this question. After accessing the silence, after accessing the power, after accessing the presence, after stilling all of her discursive thinking and just having communion with the source of life, she then spoke into that moment this question: is there any power in the vast universe that can heal me? Is there any power, anywhere, that can heal me? Now, she didn't receive an audible answer, of course. They did, even back then, have asylums. If she had talked about hearing an audible answer, that would have been a different experience for her. She didn't receive an audible answer to her question. She didn't even receive an instant cure. But she did have a shift in perspective, a shift in perception, a shift in consciousness, a change in attitude. She did suddenly develop an inward knowing that brought peace, an inward experience of unshakable peace, an inward knowing that brought a powerful experience of hope that she had not had before. And she wrote in her book, Divine Science and Healing, "The answer to my earnest inquiry was an absorbing realization of a presence. This presence was more than personal. It was omnipresence and was so illumining that I became it. I realized it to be my life." That the life, she came in contact with the life of her life, the perfect life that was living itself through her. And that life, regardless of the situations or conditions, that life was perfect. And that was her life. And Melinda immediately started feeling better about herself. She didn't jump up and start doing push-ups, but she started feeling better about herself. Her body didn't get instantly stronger, but she was less depressed about that fact. She was less worried about it and more optimistic about the future. She honestly felt as if she could and indeed would get well. And gradually, starting at that very moment, gradually her health did improve and continued to improve, and it took the earthquake of 1906 to take her out of this world. She spent the rest of her life teaching about the power of recognizing God as an omnipresence, the thing that had restored her and reinvigorated her and re-energized her when nothing else could, when cures and treatments had failed, when moving from one place to another hadn't done anything, but to realize that the perfect life that we call God was her life, that began a new journey toward a new and better experience. And she wanted to share that and teach about that and teach that the more we become conscious of that power, the more that power is able to do amazing things for and through us. And that message continues to inspire me today. The invalid that spent decades in frailty went on to start a school and a magazine and write books and travel all over the United States teaching spirituality. The woman who couldn't get out of her chair for the first 2/3 of her life, you couldn't make her sit down the last third. Melinda Kramer had her aha moment that led to a changed perspective and a changed life in 1885. And 2 years later, in 1887, in Pueblo, Colorado, another woman was having her own spiritual breakthrough. Nona Brooks had a condition whereby she couldn't eat solid food. She couldn't swallow. Her throat was always raw and inflamed. She couldn't swallow. She couldn't eat. So she was eating only soft foods. And in those days, what was that? Mashed potatoes, pudding? I mean, there wasn't a lot of choices. So she could only have liquids and soft foods and couldn't eat those in large quantities because she had such a hard time swallowing. And so she was losing weight and feeling weak. Now, she didn't know what to pray for. Being a good Presbyterian, she didn't really want to pray for a miracle. That didn't seem very Presbyterian. But her hopeless condition seemed to warrant some sort of appeal to a comforting power. And so her constant prayer was, "Give me light." Now, who knows what she meant? Light to see the blessings in the midst of the difficulty, light to see that she was stronger than she had imagined, light to see a way out of the problem, light to see that the problem, as all-consuming as it appeared to be, didn't need to define her whole existence. Who knows? But that just came to her, that that's what she should pray. And so she prayed over and over, "Give me light." In fact, she prayed that prayer daily for a year. Give me light. A friend of Nona's had experienced difficulty with her own health, and she had gone to Chicago to study with a spiritual teacher named Emma Curtis Hopkins. Now, Emma had been a Christian Science practitioner, but wound up with her own school and ministry in Chicago. And Nona's friend, Mrs. Bingham, went to Chicago to study and pray with Emma for 3 weeks, and Mrs. Bingham returned to Colorado completely reinvigorated. Well, once you've had a powerful experience, you want other people to have positive and powerful experiences. So Mrs. Bingham wanted to share the good news that she had experienced, that positive spirituality really can contribute to improved experiences in life. At very least, to improved ways of dealing with those experiences. So she started teaching classes, and she persuaded Nona to take her class. Now, this doesn't sound very Presbyterian, so Nona was reluctant. But she didn't have anything to lose, and Mrs. Bingham was her friend, so she did reluctantly agree. And this is what Nona recorded about her studies with Mrs. Bingham. She said, "It was in the 4th class. My whole being was completely flooded with a great light, this little light of mine, a light brighter than sunlight, brighter than any other light I had ever seen. It filled me. It surrounded me. I was conscious of nothing but that intense white light. I thought, of course, all the room had seen the light too, but they had not. I alone experienced this wonderful light that flooded my entire being. I then discovered I had been healed instantly and completely." Nona, like Melinda, started teaching about the joy that comes from learning that God is a presence that is never separate from us. Nona Brooks and Melinda Kramer learned of each other's experiences, and they both called their work divine science. And the once chronically ill Nona, like the once perpetually frail Melinda, started a school, and she wrote books, and she began traveling extensively. She even started a church, and she ordained some of the great positive thinking teachers of all time, including Emmett Fox, who was highly influential in the early Alcoholics Anonymous movement, and Ernest Holmes, who founded the Church of Religious Science. And Nona lived until 1945. Melinda prayed an honest question: is there any power in the vast universe that can heal me? and she received an instant shift in consciousness that led to a gradual healing. Or you could say she received an instant healing that led to a gradual cure. And so when you have that healing moment, but everything still seems like it's in the same old place, don't give up. That doesn't mean you haven't had the shift. It just means that now things have to fall into place to catch up with this internal shift you've had. And notice that her prayer was an honest question. No platitudes, nothing quoted from something else, nothing she had learned from anyone else. It just was an honest, heartfelt question. Honest questions can be far more powerful than preconceived answers. And Nona, she prayed for a year, give me light. And she finally received an instant healing as well as a profound experience of divine light. Sometimes it takes a year or years to become an instant success. Sometimes we have to just claim it and affirm it and see it and envision it and feel it and pray about it. And then when it happens overnight, we'll know that really we laid that foundation. We built that. It only got to be seen all at once, but we were doing our work the whole time. These two women, whose witness I value very much, show us the power of prayer. In my book, Saved from Salvation, I actually talk about how important prayer is to me. And this is one of the things I say about it. Of all aspects of religion, prayer may be for me the most important because it is the raw and honest calling out for comfort, the deeply held questions finding voice, the magic of hope that cannot be fettered, the energetic link to every dream and dreamer that has ever lived. The prayer might simply be the feeling of gratitude, an expression of goodwill, a gesture of hope, a spark of love, a daring declaration that things can get better, or the eternal question why, for which there is no guaranteed answer. But the vulnerability and the beauty that can be found in a moment of heartfelt prayer can be, I truly believe, life-changing, life-enhancing, life-giving. And so I remain a person of prayer. The Apostle Paul said in his first letter to the Thessalonians, in that missive, he began it by saying, grace to you and peace. Whatever you're going through, what a profound prayer. Grace to you and peace. He continued, we always give thanks to God for you. We mention you in our prayers. Prayer is at the heart of our work as a spiritual community, and it is at the heart of our lives as spiritual seekers. Sometimes when we want to give up, we'd be better off praying. And sometimes when we want to complain and kvetch, we'd be better off praying. And sometimes when we want to blame and shame and tear everything apart, we'd be better off praying. And sometimes when we just want to go to bed and stay there, we'd be better off praying. Sometimes we forget that instead of focusing on what is terrible, we can focus on what is possible. That we can know that the one that makes all things possible is right in the midst of us, that we are in the midst of it, that we are part and parcel of the power we call God. And we can focus on that instead of on the difficulty, and thereby find the wherewithal to move through, over, or around the difficulty. Nona and Melinda had amazing experiences from prayer, and then they wanted to share the message of prayer's power with others. They learned that prayer seems to work in a way it otherwise might not when our prayers come from an understanding that right where we are, God is. That God will never let us go, and that experience of God's nearness is in itself a healing endeavor. Something improves the minute we know, through and through, that God's life is living itself in and as our lives. The truth is, many of us have had profound experiences of prayer. We have prayed through the troubling night and at last found that deep sense of peace that the situation couldn't take from us. We have prayed for a loved one in trouble and somehow knew that we had done something real, that we had offered something as tangible as a hug, even if our loved one was hundreds of miles away. We have faced overwhelming circumstances and whispered our heartfelt prayer and felt instantly as if we were not alone and that somehow we could get through the situation at hand, that our dignity would remain intact, that we could go to peace instead of to pieces, no matter what was happening. Now, no one has every wish fulfilled, and everyone knows the sting of disappointment, but prayer remains a great tool to give us hope in troubling times and peace that no circumstance can take away. Prayer isn't begging God to do what God otherwise would not be inclined to do. If God is predisposed to not help me and I just have to wear God down, I'm not interested in that God. Nor is prayer hoping against hope. Hope seems foolish. Hope seems like a waste of time. I'm trying to hope anyway. You're actually hoping against hope and getting in the way of hope's power. Prayer is instead learning to cooperate with the infinite possibilities in life. By seeing prayer as an awareness of God's omnipresence and an acceptance of all the good that God's presence offers at all times, blessings seem to flow more abundantly. Even if the blessings we experience from prayer don't compare with raising the dead or parting the sea, something good is still always at hand. Prayer helps us see and seize the possibilities that always exist. Prayer is the container that we take to the ocean of blessings. We don't ask the ocean to be the ocean, we just know that it is. And we don't ask the ocean to be something else. We trust that it is what it's meant to be. We simply take as much of the ocean as we can handle in the moment, as much as our container will allow, that thimble, that cup, that jug, that tub. Prayer is what we bring to the infinite ocean to accept what is already there in far greater supply than we are able to accept. Prayer is receiving a portion of the infinite good that always exists. We can pray as Emma Curtis Hopkins did and taught, "There is good for me, and I ought to have it." Not begging, but receiving. Not wishing, but accepting. Some of you have been facing changes and challenges. I know that. You're so warm and wonderful to share those with me, sometimes by way of Facebook message, text message, phone calls, emails. I love that technology makes us all so connected and so accessible these days. And I know that some of us have lost loved ones. The reason Reverend Dr. Robert Griffin isn't here today is because he is on his way to Alabama to go to his father's funeral. We have lost loved ones. We have lost mobility. We have lost jobs. We have lost friends. We have experienced loss and changes and challenges and pain. Some of us have experienced loss or heartache. Some are in a time of uncertainty. But I offer you this Pauline blessing, the blessing that Paul offered in his first letter that he ever wrote to anyone that wound up in our canon. Grace and peace to you. I thank God for you. I name you in my prayers. And like Nona Brooks and Melinda Kramer, when I remember you before God, I know that God is right where you are. No matter what the circumstance is, God is there with you in that situation. I know that God is right where you are, that God's life is your life, and that God's light is always shining on your path to lead you to richer experiences of peace and joy and fulfillment. And this is the good news. Amen.
Hello, I want to thank you for joining us for worship today here at the Sunshine Cathedral. Again, if you're ever in the Fort Lauderdale area, please stop by and worship with us on Sundays at 9 and 10:30 a.m. If you'd like to find out more about the Sunshine Cathedral, about our resources, or about our books published by our senior pastor, the Reverend Dr. Durrell Watkins, or if you'd like to make a donation to the Sunshine Cathedral, please visit us at www.sunshinecathedral.org. Until the next time, may God continue to richly bless you on your journey.